The new defense or D3 gear set, whatever you want to call it, it is amazing for group PvP. With the rework, it finally fills the role of a true tank. Yeah, we have tanks right now in the division. And no, I'm not talking about the players with just high health pools like 9k stamina nomad builds, but I'm talking about actual tanks. The ones that can eat up damage, protect the squad, buff the squad, and crowd control the enemies. And I really think that when playing DZ with a squad, this gear set is key to survival. At least it is for PvP. The only thing that I am worried about right now is that I have no idea how to convince all of you watching to try out the new defense. I know that this gear set and playing with the shield in general has always been kind of a niche within the division. It wasn't a bad thing to do per se. Defense wasn't a bad gear set at all. That's not what I'm saying. It was very strong in PvE and definitely had a place in PvP as well. But the shield builds, they also had this sort of stigma to them. I personally do not share this opinion, but I know that a lot of players oftentimes would have this feeling of, ugh, a shield player, whenever they saw somebody with a defense build. And even as I'm telling you all of this, just how good this gear set actually is right now, how much of a must-have it is to run this in the dark zone, a good amount of you will probably still roll their eyes and think, but it's a shield build, I'm not gonna play shield. So what I'm asking of all those non-believers watching my video right now is to put those thoughts aside. Forget about that stigma, forget about the whole idea of previous shield builds for about 10, maybe 15 minutes until this video is over, because even before we get to the end of it, I can guarantee you that you will have changed your mind and you're going to want to have that one guy in your squad run with a defense build. Trust me on this one, seeing just how good defense is right now, it surprised me just as much as that it's going to surprise you. So, let's begin. Because the D3 or the defense gear set has been reworked entirely going into patch 1.8, let's start off this video by going over what the gear set actually does. The 2-piece gives the player 15% protection from elites, which doesn't really do that much in PvP. The 3-piece gives the player 10% ballistic shield damage resilience, which is actually incredibly strong. But I want to come back to that a little bit later into the video, because I just want to go over what the gear set does first. And then the 4-piece, of course, allows you to use an SMG while you have your shield deployed, and it also increases the health of the ballistic shield by 57% for every 3000 stamina that the player has. Now the shield itself, without the gear set, has actually gone through some changes as well in terms of scaling with skill power and that kind of stuff, so it actually has a hard cap on it now, but just as with the 3-piece with the 10% ballistic shield damage resilience, this is something that I'm going to come back to a little bit later into the video. The 5-piece gives you 15% more protection from elites and 5% ballistic shield damage resilience, and then the 6-piece is actually a whole list of things, but it adds 3 core features if you just want to sum it up. First up, you're going to get a fairly high damage boost to your melee attack, which is not really that useful if I'm being honest, because yes, 2000% increased damage sounds like a lot, but it still doesn't really hurt players that much, and it's usually better to just shoot your weapon and then maybe only use this bash for finishing blows if you just run out of a magazine and he has like 1 HP remaining. The second thing that the 6-piece does is that it applies all the overhealing that a player receives to the shield as a shield health. So when you're running around with the 6-piece bonus, you actually cannot get overhealed anymore. It's impossible, and if you would get overhealed, then you're gonna get that amount of health back on the shield. And this actually sounds pretty good on paper, right? So, you know, you give your shield more survivability, but without Vigorous, it is actually pretty difficult to receive overheals from other players, because not a lot of things in the game overheal you. It's only the overdose, or when somebody blows up a station, or maybe a recovery link, but that's not really gonna happen that often, and when you're gonna get healed from those sources, you're most likely on low health yourself as well, so, you know, you're still not gonna get overhealed. So I would say that this whole thing is actually a lot more situational than you would expect it to. But then, we also have one last feature that the 6-piece gives, and this is actually the most important one and the thing that makes this gear set so powerful. It pretty much reads, after taking a certain amount of damage to the shield, you will give a buff to yourself and to every squad member within 15 meters that lasts 12 seconds. The description actually says that it lasts 6 seconds and then 2 seconds for every 3000 stamina that the user has, but since we pretty much run this build with 9000 stamina for a bunch of reasons, these buffs, they're going to have a 12-second duration for the whole team. And what type of buff this is, that completely depends on the type of damage that the player has received on the shield. You have 2 different types of damage. You have physical damage, which is pretty much damage from bullets, and if you take enough physical damage, then everybody in the squad will get a 30% armor buff for 12 seconds. And there's also exotic damage, which is damage from grenades, sticky bombs, seeker mines, fire turrets, and all that stuff. And receiving damage from those sources increases everybody's damage by 30% for 12 seconds. These buffs, they can also be refreshed if you, for example, take enough damage on the shield again before the 12-second duration of the previous buff has expired. In that case, the whole buff will just be refreshed. And the armor and the damage buff can also proc at the same time, if you, for example, meet both thresholds at the same time. And we'll talk more about these buffs very soon as well. There's also one more thing that the 6-piece does, and that is that it increases the ballistic shield health by another 200% when the player reaches 9000 stamina. And this 200% is then added to the 57% health that you get per 3000 stamina that the 4-piece gives. So that means that if you're running 9000 stamina with this build, you're going to get a total of 371% more HP on the shield, which then results in a shield that has 2.35 million HP in total. Now the gear set doesn't actually say how much damage you need to take in order to proc the bonuses that we just talked about, you know, the armor bonus and the damage bonus. It did say it on the PTS, because on the PTS it was 500,000 for both of them, but in the live version of this game this value doesn't seem to be the same anymore, it's been changed. It's hard to say though what it is exactly, but from my testing it seems to be around 800,000 damage taken for the physical damage buff, the armor buff, and then 700,000 damage taken for the exotic damage buff. I want you to take these values with a grain of salt though, because I'm not sure if they're accurate. The way that I got to these numbers is by simply looking at how much health my shield has and then seeing how much health was gone percentage-wise when the buffs would get activated. But since all we have is this visual bar to see how much of the shield HP is missing, it's obviously not going to be the most precise. But yeah, let's get back to the shield HP a little bit more, because besides the scaling with stamina that you can get through the gear set, the shield health can also still be increased through skill power, but since patch 1.8, since this patch, the shield actually comes with a hard cap now. It's hard capped at a certain amount of skill power, and that certain amount is 125,000. So any skill power that you have above that 125,000 mark, that's going to be wasted, at least if you're looking at it from the shield. You might still get value out of your other skill, but for the shield, it's all wasted. And because of this, you will need to hit some check marks on your build to get the strongest shield possible. First up, you of course need to get that 125,000 skill power for the max base health. And then you also need to get the 9,000 stamina to get that strong shield multiplier on top of it. So when looking at our builds, that is pretty much what we did. We basically tried to hit those check marks. If you look at our main stats though, you'll notice that aside from the 125,000 skill power and the 9,000 stamina, this build also has a bit over 4,000 firearms, so that we're able to unlock some key talents on our house, such as Deadly and Unforgiving, which increase our damage by quite a bit. And we're able to do this, we're able to spec 4,000 into firearms because we cheated a little bit in order to get our skill power up to 125,000. Because usually, to up your skill power, you would spec into more and more electronics, right? But instead of speccing into electronics, the thing I did with this build is simply get skill power rolls everywhere, you know, the stat rolls that we usually wouldn't take if we were to follow the best in slot guide. But in this case, I actually took those rolls so that I would have the required amount of skill power, and I would be able to spec 9,000 of my main stats into stamina, and then I would still have some main stats left to spec into firearms to then get some powerful talents on my weapons. Let me go over the build real quickly here. On the chest piece, we have health, skill haste, and ammo capacity, which is pretty default, you know, almost every build has this. And then on the mask, we have, of course, skill power and burn resistance. That is also pretty standard stuff. But then, when we get to the knee pads, you'll notice that we have skill power here instead, and not health. We basically don't need health because we already are pretty tanky because of the 9,000 stamina, and this way we're going to be able to get that extra skill power. Another thing you'll notice is that I also have bleed resistance here instead of shock resistance. This is usually not what you want to take on a PvP build. Usually the things that you're going to go for are burn resistance, disrupt resistance, and then the shock resistance. But if you get shocked with the shield out, you can actually still turn your character around and still block the damage with the shield. So shock effects aren't really that dangerous to a shield player, and I felt that bleed resistance would do more for me in this case, but that's a personal preference. The backpack also has that skill power and not the health, and then it also has more disrupt resistance. The gloves have critical hit damage, skill haste, and SMG damage. Skill haste is of course still very good with this build because it allows you to get the shield back faster if it ever dies, and we're also running this with an EMP sticky, so the more you can spam that EMP sticky the better. And then critical hit damage is just pretty strong in general with SMGs because SMGs come with a lot of critical hit chance, so more critical hit damage would complement that. The holster has even more skill haste, and then we have 4 mods with skill haste as well. However, to get to that 125,000 skill power amount needed to cap out the shield's health, we did need to get one mod with skill power instead of skill haste, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, again, because we have it set up like this, we have the tankiest shield possible because we hit the skill power cap, we hit the 9,000 stamina, but we're also not completely useless when it comes down to the damage department because, of course, the house itself, it already hits really hard, it's one of the best weapons this patch, but having those extra firearms and the extra damage talents on it really gives you an extra punch in PvP. The way that I modded this house is pretty standard. It's critical hit damage mods everywhere, and then the standard weapon mag with extended magazine size, rate of fire, and critical hit chance. Nothing really out of the ordinary here, and I also got a double barrel shotgun that I can just swap out that has predatory indeterminate as well, which then helps out if your ult's on cooldown. You can just use this to kill some red or purple mobs. You probably already know all about this because this isn't the first time that I've brought up the whole determined double barrel shotgun thing in a video. Now, the one thing that I said that I wanted to come back to is the ballistic shield damage resilience that the 3-piece and the 5-piece come with. I said this was really powerful, and it is really powerful, which is why I wanted to come back to it. Ballistic shield damage resilience basically falls under the all damage resilience category, same as talents such as crit save and on the move and the survivor link, for example, and all of these things, they stack additively with each other. So if we do the math real quick here, we get 10% damage resilience as a base from the base shield, that's what the shield always comes with. Then we have 10% from the 3-piece, so that's 20. Then we have 5% from the 5-piece, and then we have 4 performance mods as well, which all have 5% ballistic shield damage resilience as well. You put all of those together, and we sit at 45% all damage resilience. So that means that if I get this right, and I'm pretty sure that I have this right, that means that the D3 user has 45% all damage resilience as long as the shield is up. And I know that sounds pretty ridiculous, but it's true. And just to put that into perspective, the survivor link gives the user 50% all damage resilience. So give or take 5%, as long as the player has a shield up, he basically has a permanent survivor link on him on top of the 9,000 stamina health pool and the 2.3 million HP shield. But that's not where it stops though, because the 45% all damage resilience also applies to the shield. So the effective health of the shield is pretty much twice as what it tells you to be on paper. And that still isn't where it stops, because remember that 30% armor buff that you would get when receiving 800,000 damage on the shield? Well, that armor buff is additive with your own armor, which means that with a min-max build, your armor will go up from 33.5% to 63.5% damage mitigation. And together, with all the damage resilience from the shield and from the armor buff and from your 9,000 stamina main stats, that's going to put your toughness well over 2 million. It's not exactly going to be 2 million, of course, and in this clip we used the survivor link to emulate the 45% resilience that you get while carrying the shield, because you can't hold your shield up and then check your menu, so you can't actually check the toughness in real time. But again, survivor link is 50%, the shield gives you 45%, so it's not that big of a difference. Around 2 million toughness is what your character will be sitting at, and that's pretty crazy. And this armor buff is really where it is at. It is what makes this build strong. Because of this whole buff alone, you want people to shoot at you. You want to go out there and you want to go and take that damage. You want to go in as a tank. And even if you have a lot of players that try to shoot around you or shoot you from behind or try to take you down, there's no way that a few bullets aren't going to hit the shield. And with the PvP damage modifier that's applied to the shield, you know, the bullets hit pretty hard on the shield, so you're gonna get that damage threshold of 800,000 damage pretty quickly. And then once it's there, bam, the whole team gets a 30% armor buff. And everybody is basically twice as tanky for 12 seconds long. And that's a very, very powerful thing. This is actually how we played it out in the Dark Zone as well. We held up somewhere with lots of cover and then let the defense player walk up to all the people trying to kill us. And then obviously, as soon as they saw the defense player, they started shooting at him. Some bullets hit the shield. And then we got the armor buff. We rushed out of the hiding spot. And we literally killed 8, 10, 12 people just like that, because they simply couldn't kill us because of the armor buff. And remember, the duration also refreshes, so as long as the defense player is able to keep his shield up and some bullets are going to hit that shield, well, the whole squad is basically running around on steroids. The one argument that you can make though, and I've seen a lot of players try to make this argument, is that good players will simply ignore the D3 player, will not shoot his shield, and will only focus on the other players in the squad, so that, you know, they're not going to get the value out of the armor buff. And while this is definitely true, in a hypothetical scenario, this can definitely happen, Let me just tell you that in reality, this never happens. If people see you, they shoot at you. It's the same with the 6-piece final measure. When it got buffed to 40% damage when you defuse a frag grenade, I thought that, yeah, you know, running final measure might be strong, but as soon as people realize that you have a 6-piece final measure, they're just not going to throw nades anymore. From experience, I know now that that's not the case. You can run with 4 final measures and people will still keep throwing nades. I don't know why, they just do. And it's the same with the shield. You put the shield up, you walk up to people, they're gonna shoot you and you're gonna get the stamina buff every single time. Now, as I said already, besides the shield, you should also be running with an EMP sticky, because with the skill ace that we have on the build, and in combination with our pretty powerful weapon, we'll be able to add a lot of pressure on other players with this. Disabling their healing stations or forcing out medkits when they don't want to use their medkits, that kind of stuff. And the talents that I have are Combat Medic, because of course I want to be able to heal the shield up. Crit Save, because that makes me even tankier when popping a medkit in the last health segment. Adrenaline for the 7 seconds of immunity. If I, for example, have to push back and the shield is on cooldown and they're trying to focus me down, this is really useful. And then, of course, Precision to give myself more damage, just in case other players do not have their conceal pulls up. Now, before I end the video, I want to leave you with one more trick as well that I figured out while playing the game. Which allows you to get the 30% damage buff for taking 700,000 exotic damage on your shield to get that on demand. Because admittedly, you very rarely proc this buff. It's actually very rare that you take 700,000 exotic damage on the shield. Unlike the armor buff, of course. The armor buff is super easy to proc, but the damage buff, it almost never happens. But there is a way to get this on demand. And the way you do that is by using frag grenades, because of course if you're playing defense you still have your 4 frag grenades and you can use these to try and stagger the enemies, but you can also use them to grenade yourself. You can throw a grenade right in front of the shield and you can still damage your own shield with your frag grenades, and because frag grenades are exotic damage, this is going to proc the damage buff. 1 grenade isn't going to be enough to meet that threshold though. You're always going to need 2 grenades, which means that with every restock you can only do this twice in a fight, unless you manage to find some other grenades in the DZ from dead players or something like that. So it's not something that you can always do, but if you ever happen to have 2 grenades, or let's say that you just got naded and you've got 1 nade in your inventory, you can just quickly throw another nade in front of you and that's going to proc the 30% damage buff for the whole squad for 12 seconds long. And that's definitely something that can swing the favor of a fight your way, especially when you combine it with the 30% armor buff and the 40% damage buff from the final measure 6-piece that you get for defusing a frag grenade. We've had a few situations where all of these buffs would be active at the same time, and in those cases, well, there's not going to be anyone left standing. The one thing I will say though with this build is that it's only going to be good within a group setting. It's probably best to run it in a full 4-player team. And even when you're with 3 players, this build already loses a lot of its strengths, because first and foremost, you need a healer to keep yourself alive, because you're going to take a lot of damage. The damage also needs to be healed up, and less teammates mean less combat medics, and it also means that less players are going to get the buff as soon as you take the damage threshold on the shield. I wouldn't really recommend running this build solo or when you're a duo, for example. I'm not saying that it can't work, I'm just saying it's not going to be as strong. If you still aren't convinced yet that D3 is the thing to go for in squad play now, then I've also left you with some raw gameplay of me playing defense in the description box down below. Go a bit easy on me because I haven't had too much time with this gear set yet, so I'm not the best player. And also, don't be confused by the footage, because I'm playing on a friend's account and that friend is playing on my account. We basically swapped accounts while playing because my healer build is more optimized than his healer build and his tank build is more optimized than my tank build. And we wanted to swap roles. I wanted to play the tank, he wanted to play the healer. So we simply swapped accounts for the time being, so that we wouldn't be at a disadvantage, so to speak, with unoptimized builds. As always, I'm going to leave you with a complete overview of the build right here. You can do with it whatever you want, download it, screenshot it, and then as always, I will see you guys later. Or, like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later.